Hello, everyone. My name is Philippe, as you know. This week we have Matt Alston as the guest, um, and we will going to talk about social tokens mainly, but also how we got into Web3, how we got into social tokens, why social tokens are useful for creators and professionals, both in Web3, but also to any kind of professional or creator. I think, that alone will be sufficient for a big conversation, but also talking a little bit about your own career journey. We always like to focus or to explore a little bit of our guests' career journeys and what were the main kind of inflection points, changes, how we got into Web3 and all that. And of course, about Bonfire, the company you founded. But when it was that you started Bonfire?
So we really broke ground April 2021, and then launched the kind of MVP of the product beginning of June 2021.
Thank you so much for your time and accepting our invitation. And yeah, let us know a little bit more about you, of course, because I know you pretty well, but people listening don't, and kind of your road, kind of where you went to school, going through Uber, and then going into Web3 and starting Bonfire.
Yeah, for sure. So I grew up and studied computer science at Duke, and that's actually where I met Melissa, my co-founder. So we've been friends 9 going on 10 years. We actually met like the second week freshman fall, and we're pretty close ever since. She studied computer science and econ. And then, yeah, post graduation, I joined Uber as a product manager. I spent time on a few different teams, but the majority of my time I was working on rider loyalty. And so I joined that team as we were designing and building the kind of original version of Uber Rewards, and got to see that program through to launch. And then post launch, I was focused on just the US program and like optimizing the program for ROI, and also gamification, personalization, and some stuff around partnerships. And so it was really just, now that we have a loyalty point in the ecosystem, like what are all the new business opportunities that that could unlock. And for Uber, it was all about engendering long term loyalty, and really shifting riders away from like a very transactional price shop on every trip kind of mentality to something that's a little more based in brand affinity. So I spent a lot of time working on kind of Web2 loyalty and rewards. And so when I learned like what social tokens were, and how they were starting to be used by creators, communities in Web3, I think I immediately resonated with the idea and concept, and felt like there was a lot that I could potentially offer to the space. And so that was really beginning of 2021 that I learned what social tokens and NFTs really were, and started down the Web3 rabbit hole. And a few months later is when we really kicked off Bonfire. So yeah, that's the brief journey. I think Melissa, my co-founder, so she's been in Web3 since 2015. She actually started the Duke Blockchain Lab when we were still on campus, and then joined Coinbase right out of school, and was there until starting this company with me. And so she definitely had much more of a Web3 background. And really for me, it's still newer. I still feel like a beginner, but I guess a year in Web3 actually makes me somewhat like I have a lot of experience relative, I would say, to the average at this point.
Yeah, yeah, especially if we focus on the social token space, which is a very small space within this small space, which is Web3. And especially, yeah, I think in this space, you are probably one of the people with the most knowledge. Because I mean, we think about the topic every day from this different perspectives. But yeah, thank you for the intro, and trying to explore a little bit kind of this intersection between what you did at Uber and kind of working on kind of the loyalty point system, and working on creating these incentive structures, um, and how it relate to what you're building now. So kind of social tokens, and how social tokens can be also kind of an incentive reward or a way to recognize people for actions that they do?
Yeah. So
What do you think what do you think is similar and what do you think is different about the two approaches or two technologies?
yeah, well, maybe I'll start with like Web2 loyalty and some of the kind of principles that go into it. And really the objective obviously is a business driven one. So it's, it is an ROI calculation, but it's really how do I identify and reward the most valuable customers to a business. And oftentimes the reason why you're doing that is because those people, they're the most valuable and thus you want to keep them happy. You care a lot about their retention. You care disproportionately about, retaining those users, keeping them happy because they are driving so much business value. And so it really is a win-win because you as a business are trying to give them an elevated or differentiated experience to keep them happy so that they will like continue to use your product. And the reason you're doing that is because they're already like the most valuable and their behavior is like, the type that you want to encourage and reward. And so it really is this kind of Pareto benefit where you are, as a business, like allocating value to the people who create the most value for you. And, that's a win-win when designed well. And I think a big part of like what makes a loyalty program work or not work is the idea that as a business, you have something that's valuable to your customers that doesn't cost you a lot to give away. And so that's what you see for like airlines and hotels where, they have free upgrades, but they do it opportunistically when they otherwise didn't sell that seat or like, couldn't book that room. And in that case, there's basically no cost to giving that away, but they're able to give it to their most valuable customers. And so as an airline, you're able to like offer a really valuable benefit to passengers, which is the opportunity or the possibility of an upgrade. And as a customer, like because you are loyal and because you like, fly with that airline all the time, you might every once in a while receive this free upgrade, which is really valuable to you. So I think like that's sort of one really big component of loyalty programs that make them work. Another is financial engineering, which is definitely a big rabbit hole we could go down if it's interesting, but definitely also pertains to Web3. But I think the last one is that a lot of the history around loyalty programs is around just knowing who your customers are in the first place. And so in a world where like, most of retail was happening in brick and mortar and with cash, it's extremely hard to like know who your customer is. So if you're like Chipotle and somebody walks in every day and buys a burrito with cash, you have like no idea who that is at like a corporate level. And that makes it really hard to, target or offer them any kind of like elevated experience. And so a lot of loyalty programs are really just about also collecting an email address or collecting some personal information about somebody so that you can start to build a relationship. And I think like all of these are concepts that definitely apply in Web3 to creators and community builders. But I think to draw a contrast, in Web3, you're not talking about like this loyalty point or this kind of closed system, like, slight amount of value that you can give out to customers. You're talking about like real assets backed by real markets. And it is, clearly much, much more powerful. So when I think of like social tokens or NFTs, there's sort of two metaphors that I like, lean on. One is the reward point. But the other is equity, and obviously equity ownership. Those are really important concepts in Web3, and I think social tokens and NFTs lie somewhere in the middle. Like they're not really one or the other. They're definitely not equity, and at the same time, they're not as simple as a rewards point because they do represent ownership and a brand, a community, a creator, and so I think that makes them a lot more powerful. But I think just to sort of put up, I think what is very consistent across Web 2 and Web 3 is that in a Web 2 context, creators don't really know who their true fans are. Like that data exists, but it's completely siloed and it's gate kept by platforms. So if you're a musician, maybe it's Spotify. If you're a video content creator, it's YouTube and Twitch. And because you don't have access to who your true fans are, you can't actually engage with them directly. You can't offer them a differentiated experience, and you can't like unlock the part of the demand curve that they would exist on in an open market. And these Web3 assets, I think, gives you the ability to identify, who are your true supporters, do so in a way that can't be gatekept and is not dependent on any one platform. And I think that's really powerful. If you, think out 10 years, you could easily see CRM products basically being built around, one's token, who holds that token, how much they hold, how did they acquire it. And I think that's just a really powerful idea of there's a CRM now, which is predicated on these Web3 assets. And I think that actually has a lot of similarities to why loyalty programs got started in Web2. So those are maybe some of the similarities and differences.
Yeah, I think there's a good summary of the conversation we're about to have. Some of the, I think, interesting points. But what I was thinking before we kind of go down the creator rabbit hole, let's just kind of close the conversation on brands, because I also think it's interesting. So you were explaining why businesses and brands, it makes sense for them to have loyalty points and those kind of reward systems. And you kind of already highlighted why it might make sense for brands to evolve into a Web3 kind of loyalty point or reward system. Because, I mean, you highlighted that it's not only access the kind of points and reputations, and it's something that you earn and you have a score, but also it's a change in mindset. So actually, when you own the token, you feel like you're partial owner of that brand, that product, and it's not just a point in some closed system. So it's actually an asset that can have value. And also, I think the data perspective you mentioned is super interesting. So it actually gives over time. So all the interaction you have with the token, how much you buy, how much you earn, how much you spend, and who spend it, I think, over time will build a very powerful CRM for brands, but also for creators. Why do you think, just I was asking you a question and answering but just to summarize it, close kind of the branch, why do you think, what would be the arguments you would use to convince a CMO of a brand that they should move to Web3 for their kind of loyalty points? Or imagine you're talking with your the CMO of Uber. Why should they start doing social tokens or NFTs for their rewards instead of just Web?
Well, I'd recommend a company like Uber to try and migrate their loyalty program into Web3 assets at this stage, just because there's too much
risk.
Yeah, exactly. There's too much risk. There's too much to lose, and fundamentally.
So
go ahead.
What kind of brands do you think could or should start experimenting with this, or could benefit from experimenting with this?
Yeah, so I would definitely recommend brands to begin dipping their toes in and experimenting. And I think, honestly, NFTs right now are the safer and clearer path to start experimenting in Web3. And you are seeing a lot of brands do that effectively. So I think Adidas is definitely one to pay a lot of attention to, because I think they have positioned themselves as very kind of the values and community of Web3. I think they're doing a pretty excellent job of experimenting without, disrupting their core business. And I think that's an interesting one. I think RTFKT being acquired by Nike is another one that's really interesting just to watch. I know the fashion brands are all looking at NFTs, of course. And so I would say that for a brand that's already at scale and already has a business, probably you should be looking at NFTs as the place to experiment for now. But at their Web3 native brand, if you are a CPG company getting started today and you want to position yourself as more Web3 native, then I think you can be a little bit more ambitious. You can integrate a token economic model or some of these concepts of Web3 into your core business versus experimenting with something that kind of lives completely outside of your core business. So I think it depends on, where you are as a brand. how much progress you have to date, like how much do you have to lose and like what the risk is. And that's like, I think a very, very case by case basis. But I would say in most cases, if I was actually talking to a CMO of any brand, I would probably be um, just indexing more on NFTs versus fungible assets, just because of the regulatory scrutiny and risk alone.
Okay, yeah, yeah. That's so back to creators and kind of playing social tokens more from a personal perspective, either creators, artists, or uh, people. So you were mentioning, maybe we can pick up that thread, so kind of fungible and non-fungible. How do you think social tokens can help um, creators and artists? And what's kind of the difference between, or for which use cases do you think it's better to use a fungible token, a social token, or an NFT? Which cases are best? We're using an NFT.
So I think that I mean, my high level thinking, which is definitely evolving pretty quickly, is that by by the nature of them being programmable, there's actually a ton of overlap between fungible and non-fungible tokens in what they can do. So you can, design an NFT to fund a membership to a community. You can also use a fungible token to represent membership in a community. And so I think in a lot of ways they are complementary, but also overlapping. And so, you see communities built around NFTs, you see communities built around fungible tokens, and I think both can be effective. I think that for creators, the immediate value that we are, I think, seeing is using NFTs as a business model. And so selling NFTs to a community of collectors, and it's sort of patronage plus, as Jesse Walden likes to refer to it as. And I think that's one big component. Another big component might be like entry or membership within a community. Obviously, speculation and kind of the potential resale value is driving a lot of the activity. And so you're seeing a lot of use cases around creators minting, selling NFTs, and then fans collecting those NFTs. And I think that's one really powerful use case that is probably the first to achieve product market fit. And then I think the second kind of really big use case, which I alluded to earlier, is around using these as like community building assets, in the sense that maybe you don't have to sell them at all. Maybe you're giving them away. I mean, so imagine the case of a musician. Instead of selling music NFTs, or maybe in addition to selling music NFTs, as you tour, you're giving NFTs to everyone who attends your concert, and maybe you're like, giving fungible token to people who are streaming the song, or, helping promote or amplify the distribution of the song. And over time, that starts to become, I think, a really powerful CRM, for lack of a better term, of where fans are, and like how they've engaged with you in the past. You can quantify their fandom because there is now like an actual measure. And so I think that will become increasingly a really powerful value proposition for creators, is just the ability to understand who their true fans are and interact with them directly. And the asset doesn't need to be like the business model for the creator. It can just be like a way that they understand who their fans are, and then they can build businesses around that. And so I think that right now there's definitely a lot of focus on buying, selling, flipping, just sort of like the more straightforward use cases. I think that as tooling applications, as platforms get built around these Web3 assets, it'll become increasingly about like using the tokens versus purely like transacting in them, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think, well, what I got from that explanation, that the social token isn't much more a symbol of the relationship. So how long are the artist and the fan connected? How deep is their connection? So measured by the amount of tokens that they have. So it's more like a long-term symbol of that relationship. And like we were saying, it gives the artists or creators a lot more data about who their fans really are and who are the top fans or the high fans and the ones that just follow them. And NFT is more focused on when you actually need income or to raise some money for a specific goal, and kind of more focused on specific projects and collectibles. But
Yeah,
yeah, I think guessing
I think
they're more powerful when probably.
I think they're most powerful when combined. I think that NFTs are better as a business model. I don't think that fungible tokens really can be a business model for a creator, because otherwise you are quite literally selling securities, I think, by the letter of the law. So I think like fungible tokens are, by nature of being fungible, they're great at they're great at microtransactions, at like small value sorts of transactions. They're great at measuring in sort of a like ranked way, like people's like level of engagement or level of patronage or fandom. And so, and they function better as a currency, obviously, because they're fungible. And then I think NFTs function better as like status, as like a sense of identity, by nature of being non-fungible. I think they're also better as a business model because, a collectible is something that is very easy to sell and is relatively non-risky to sell, where fungible that you sell has a lot of regulatory kind of considerations. So I think that's like the two main differences. So I think that they're very powerful when used together. I think that if you're, using one, if you're only going to use one, probably NFTs are like the easier starting point. I would say that in general, almost every fungible token based community will also use NFTs, but I'm not actually so sure that the inverse is true. So I think there could be communities that are built around NFTs that never incorporate a fungible token. But I think that almost every community that uses fungible tokens will also be incorporating NFTs, because I think it just makes a lot of sense and there's a lot less, risk there. So I think that's kind of how I see the difference. But I think it's still very much evolving. So we'll see. And the lines get blurred also because like ERC 1155s are like semi-fungible tokens. So it's definitely not clear cut.
Yeah. I mean, we're very early stage, and this is all, like you said, it's evolving, but it's here from you kind of this distinction. I think it helps people kind of understand a little bit more about what's powerful about each of the tools. Also, I mean, when we're comparing social fungible and non-fungible, but also another debate that we usually see is kind of Web3 versus Web2, and sometimes it feels like a creator and artists, or even people like us, that you need to kind of move to Web3, and that means kind of leaving Web2, which is not, of course, not true. And sometimes you have this debate. So what in terms of kind of this transition and kind of creators using Web3 tools to kind of improve their business, their art, what would you say is how to connect the two, how to create kind of a bridge between Web2 and Web3? How can you kind of stack Web3 on top of your existing channels, your existing platforms? I know this is in a way Bonfire and what you're building connects to this, but we'll go into Bonfire in a second. But yeah, how would you try to, what advice would you give a creator when he's trying to decide, okay, I have this Web2 platforms and audience, how can I kind of stack Web3 tools on top of this?
Yeah. I mean, I definitely don't think that Web3 is going to replace Web2, or I'm not even sure that we would want it to. I think that it's like an additional layer. I think it adds a lot more potential for value capture for creators, communities, for basically people who create online. And I think that it is like a much needed additional layer on top of Web2. And so what I mean by that is like Web2 is extremely effective at growing an audience. And the centralized nature of platforms and the algorithms that they build have created these like, really, you might not love the platforms or the products themselves, but it is sort of incredible that we get these networks, these like extremely refined and um, consumer friendly products, and we use them for free. And so I think, you know, the products that have gotten built in Web2 are pretty incredible. It's going to continue to be the best place, I think, if you're a creator, to grow your audience, to, have the benefits of discovery, because consumers are going to continue to consume video on YouTube and, hear about the news on Twitter and, watch their favorite gamer on Twitch. The biggest problem with Web2 is that the only business model that has really worked there is advertisement, and like advertisement is very much this winner take all sort of dynamic. It kind of reduces everyone down to lowest common. And so as a creator, like, your content is commoditized by the platform. Don't get access to your true fans, or like have the ability to interact with them outside of the contexts of the platform. And then the platform has like total leverage over the economics, because, my 10,000 followers is not valuable in its own right. It's only valuable when it can be aggregated with, a billion other people on the internet. And then these black box algorithms can basically target ads to me. And so I think that Web2 is going to be the place where you're going to want to continue to grow your audience, but it's failed to enable creators to monetize. And I think Web3 is going to offer the capabilities for a creator to interact with their fans, to monetize much more effectively, and to really build like super fan communities that I think will be really additive to what else they're doing. And so I think that there will be kind of the existing Web2 networks that will future. I think that if you're a creator, like, your goal is really to build a super fan community. And I think Web3 just offers kind of the tools that are best suited to doing that. I really don't think as a creator, you like fragment your community. Like, you don't want your Web3 segment of the community to be entirely divorced from your Web2 community. Really, it's much more optimal if it's a subset. It's like a subset of your super fans. It's the people who like most love you, and they're able to use Web3 assets as a way to kind of like build community around those people. I think that's a much more like promising future than either leaving your Web2 community behind and trying to like start over in Web3, or by like trying to maintain two like totally independent communities. And so that's, I guess, like just a rambly way of expounding on that point. But I think that like, yeah, there's gonna a need to be some coherence across like your community in Web2 and your community in Web3. And over time, hopefully, like, there's no longer need to like draw that distinction for a creator.
Yeah, I really like that way of explaining it. So seeing at the community for your super fans, or the space where your super fans kind of gather, and kind of the Web2 being kind of the bigger audience, and then the people that really want to be more involved and more connected to you have that option of getting your social tokens on NFTs and getting access to an kind of insider kind of space, inside space where they can hang with each other and be closer to the people that they're supporting or following. With, of course, that added benefit that this super fan community is actually owned by you, and there's no third party platform kind of exploiting or taking advantage or capitalizing on those relationships. You also have the data, so you know which people are your super fans and which are not. Of course, I think the key thing here is because nowadays there's no overlap or no way to connecting the two. So kind of bridging or bringing people from Instagram, YouTube, TikTok to engage with your social token is not very easy. I don't know. Do you think in the future that those Web2 platforms will integrate social tokens and NFTs, or be kind of new players easily to explore that, and will be kind of still kind of a gap between the two?
Well, I think so. I mean, I definitely think all the Web2 platforms are, there's a team internally that's figuring out their Web3 strategy. Some of them are, already shipping Web3 features. So, Twitter now is
Mhm.
able to verify NFTs as profile pictures. And I think I just read that like OnlyFans is about to do the same thing, and TikTok's done NFT drops, and Instagram is reportedly gonna, enable NFTs to be minted on the platform. And so it's kind of funny. So I think these major networks definitely will experiment and also dabble. But the irony here is the whole reason I think that we need Web3 is because like all these companies very intentionally silo and gatekeep the data because that is their moat. And
And their business model.
right, it's their moat and their business model. And if they just shared the data, we arguably wouldn't even need Web3 to like accomplish some of these objectives. And so like Web3 is very much Web3, but I think at least this specific part of, creators able to use Web3 to engage directly with their fans is a result of the fact that these platforms are gatekeepers and like that they, keep the data from. And so I think if these platforms start making it easy for creators to mint NFTs and they do so in a way that is like consistent with like the broader Web3 ecosystem, then it means creators will be able to take those NFTs off the platform, bring them to other platforms, and in theory, like build these communities that are like completely agnostic to the platform. And so I see that, I guess, as fundamentally at odds with how these platforms work, how they make money. Most of them are public companies. And so I think it'll be very hard for them to like truly um, shift or like make the evolution into Web3. I think that it'll be kind of innovator's dilemma. I think that they'll do things like, support NFT profile pictures because it doesn't cost them anything to do that. But I think when it comes to the more powerful aspects of Web3, I do see that as sort of fundamentally at odds with how these platforms today work. And so I would be very surprised if they were able to make, the leap. And so I would anticipate that down the line, there's Web3, aggregators that eventually do creep up and start to siphon away engagement from the Web2 networks.
Yeah, makes sense. So changing gears a bit, and I mean, we've been circling around Bonfire for a while. So for those who are not familiar with what Bonfire is, can you kind of explain what is Bonfire and what's kind of the main problem you're trying to solve?
Yes. So Bonfire is basically building white label infrastructure to enable creators to build Web3 homes for their community. And then we're building a set of tools to offer greater utility to Web3 assets through things like airdrops, bounties, and token gated events and experiences. And so really like you can almost think of it as like a Web3 website builder, but a way to like import your Web3 assets, your NFTs, your social tokens, whatever assets you may be minting as a creator. You can connect to a custom domain or subdomain. And then we're building the toolbox to do things like distribute tokens more seamlessly for engagement, to offer token holders, token gated content, events, experiences, and really just like the tools to enable the types of like fan engagement that I've been kind of touching on throughout the conversation.
Yeah, can you do maybe just to make sure it's clear for the people listening? Can you kind of describe a use case or an example? So, like for example, I don't know, or use an example you have on the platform. You don't need to tell his name, but kind of just guys, the kind of things someone is doing with their fans.
Yeah,
Or what their fans could do.
yeah. So
paint as a picture so we can visualize.
for sure. So right now
What it
we're
looks
pretty
like.
focused on the musician vertical, and so I'll give a couple examples of like recent drops that have like happened on Bonfire. And so, for example, there was a larger musician who's about to drop a bunch of music, and you know how like whenever you put out a new song, there's like a pre-save campaign where fans can basically like click a button. They're pre-saving the song or album, and then when it drops, they'll receive an email that's basically like, the song's live. Come stream it now. And so this artist basically had a campaign set up using our airdrop where whenever somebody pre-saved the album, they'd receive an automated email that would include like a link to claim some number of their tokens. And so it was basically a way to gift tokens to people who were pre-saving the music or engaging with them. And then another musician who's actually about to do a swear token holders. So people who are holding more than 50 of this token are able to like unlock access to a music library. So it'll be basically freestyles, stems, like a sample pack. So stuff that is not going to get uploaded to Spotify. It's not like product, but it is something that if you're a lover of his music, you'd be really excited about getting access to. And they're essentially like token gating that access. So instead of instrumenting a paywall, you know, they're making the token the primary way to access this like additional value or exclusive value within their community. So yeah, those are a couple of use cases. So token drops, merch drops, and then like token gated access to content, merch, experiences. Like that's the type of use case that we're building for. Was that clear?
Yeah. I think it was kind of filling in that gap. So nowadays and for a while now that it's kind of easier, not easy, but easier for artists and creators to launch their own token. There's plenty of platforms that help them launch the token, but
Like Talent.
the harder part, yeah, like Talent Protocol. I mean, Talent Protocol is kind of trying to solve.
Yeah, no, you guys are solving a different problem, really,
different problem. Yeah, but we're trying to be more kind of vertically integrated. So we help launch a token, but we also help do kind of some of those kind of engagement and using your token with your community, connecting you with potential supporters to buy your token. So we're kind of a more vertically integrated platform where people can do from launching to using to engaging with supporters. But for most creators, I mean, probably even Rally as doesn't have that much kind of utility to the token. There's the rewards, but people can actually launch a token, but after that, kind of distributing, airdropping, giving fans use cases on how they can use or can spend or can earn the token is I think the part that the gap that you're trying to fill that wasn't very easy. And it's not very easy to do because you cannot integrate them with other platforms, like we mentioned, like with Instagram or YouTube or with Shopify in the store. So they don't really support those integrations. And there aren't any Web3 tools that allow you to do those interactions easily, especially for non-Web3 native people. So most of the fans of these musicians won't be experts in crypto and Web3, so they need kind of a user-friendly way to interact with these tokens. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Explain Bonfire from a different perspective.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think we sort of just think about it as like the whole promise of Web3 is these, open source protocols, open source assets, open source data. And so at the moment, we don't mint tokens at all, really, because we're very much just focused on how to bring greater utility to existing tokens. Because ultimately, I think there'll be lots of platforms and maybe even lots of chains, lots of networks. And, really, we're just trying to, I guess, build for this new mental model of the internet where people have inventories and assets and they show up with, a profile and a wallet already. And so we're trying to just kind of build, I guess, more horizontal tooling that enables a creator to manage those as a community around them.
Cool. So the way I can frame it in my mind is almost like a better version of Linktree. So kind of the link that a creator can share with their community, and they have all of these added features. So Linktree on steroids, where you can actually earn tokens and spend tokens, not just kind of links to some other places. I was interested to know from kind of your perspective of a kind of worker, like both of us, what role does this kind of, I mean, we call it superfan community for musicians, but maybe in our case, for professionals, it's more kind of your support network, kind of those people that support your career. kind of succeed. And this is, I think, and this is kind of what we're focusing on Talent Protocol, because this is most of the cases very invisible on these people that helped you and helped me, either through mentoring, through intros, through referrals, with feedback, or sometimes even with money, a place to crash, something like that, that helped us succeed. They're definitely not rewarded, but in most cases, not even recognized. They're not recognized either publicly and sometimes not even in private. And by having that token or NFTs even applied to this idea of careers and professional journeys, the token can help both with recognition, because you can either by earning or by buying them, you can track when people supported you and how much they supported you with, but also of course the reward, so they can also have an upside when you succeed. But but taking it a step back, tell me, in your case, what role did kind of having a support network around you played through university, at Uber, and now at Bonfire?
You mean just for me personally, right? Like,
Yeah, so you're personally. So yeah, kind of, because we have this belief that your support network is as important, or sometimes even more important, than actually how talented you are. So having a good support network around you is probably a better indicator of future success than actually skill or talent. Because you could have a person that's not so talented, but with, say, had a good support network around them, they'll probably be more successful than someone that is talented with no support network.
yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely true. And I think, I think your network is definitely everything. And that's, I think, because well, it depends on the career, and like what exactly you're trying to do, of course. Um,
Mhm.
in But I think the knowledge work and, and definitely in the creator kind of landscape and entertainment and a lot of these like really, really big markets, there is a really important role of like, a curator or well, curator, gatekeeper. There's people who are like between you and like success, like the platform that you need, or like the job that you need, or the opportunity that you need. And oftentimes your network is, the way to like get the foot in the door, get the opportunity introduction, get the chance to like prove your talent or to show or demonstrate your talent or skill. And so, I think it's super powerful. I think in my case, I think my school network was a big deal, in terms of, and I think there's like the direct network. So it's like the, alumni that helped make referrals or helped, intro me to the right folks to originally get the job at Uber. It's also, of course, like the credential of the organization or institution plays a and then I think at Uber, like continuing to develop that network, such that I had, advisors I really trusted and had strong relationships with, and, former employees or alumni of Uber, like went on to start companies or went on to become VCs. And so, I think that the network, is built through the experiences that you do, and then comes back and pays dividends kind of in the future. And I think that's a huge part of like how most careers develop. And, I think a lot of people who have achieved a lot of success can kind of look back to that person who endorsed them or co-signed them or took a chance on them like really early in their career. And that was, really the inflection point for them, or that put them in a position that otherwise they may not have had access to. And certainly there's like some compounding advantages there. It's like, success begets success. And I think all of that's derived from your network. So I think, critically important. I think, what you all are doing at Talent Protocol and like building, like helping, more intentionally build networks around really promising individuals. I think that's really, really powerful. And so, I don't know if that really answered the question,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
but no, I think it's really important.
I have probably more concrete follow-ups to that. And one is, who are your biggest supporters? Kind of when you decided to start Bonfire, and currently, would you say are your biggest kind of supporters for Bonfire, and you as a kind of co-founder of Bonfire?
Well, of
And also,
course.
I mean, that's the first one. Who are them? And then as kind of second follow up is you kind of manage or maintain kind of this personal connections with the people that support you. So you have these people around you that support your goals, your ambitions. So who are they, and how do you kind of manage and maintain all these connections?
So I mean, I'll take those in order. So I think like my family, certainly number one is day one supporters, and like, completely unconditional support. So certainly wouldn't have gotten anywhere without their support. I think close friends and like, especially, as I left Uber and began starting a company, it's like, it is a very hard thing. It seems really risky. It feels very isolating. And so, you know, I think close friends have been extremely supportive. More recently, my girlfriend has been extremely supportive. But then I think professionally, um, I think that it was really finding communities of just people, more peers, even than like, mentors, but people who just knew what it was like kind of going through that experience. So for me, almost as soon as I left Uber, I joined On Deck, which is a community of founders or people who are, making a pivot into kind of early stage startups as a career. And so through that, it was like a 10-week fellowship. And through that, I hundreds of other founders from around the world working in all different spaces. But those are still like some of my like really close friends, people who I lean on a lot from like an accountability and support perspective. And it's just like really helpful to have that sense of community and support from people who like know what it is like to go through what you're going through. So I think for me, I definitely intentionally sought that out as I was beginning the founder journey, and I think a lot of my close friends now are other founders, and those are people who I can kind of lean on and commiserate with and jam on ideas with, and I think that's just like a really really powerful form of network, and so I was able to kind of seek that community out early in the founder journey, and I think now it's definitely compounded, and I get introduced to new founders all the time, and starting to have a network of peers there.
Mhm.
I mean, I think more recently, like a lot of our investors, those are people who quite literally took early financial bets on us and have been incredibly supportive, and we have great relationships with all of the investors, and talk to them frequently. And I think the last part of your question on like how do I manage it, I really don't have much process. Like there's not like a rhyme or reason really to managing it. I think things like Twitter are honestly awesome because I kind of have these more serendipitous interactions where I wasn't necessarily thinking about someone, but then they show up in my timeline and like it reminds me to reach out, or it's something I see reminds me like, oh wait, I should actually send this to so and so. They would find this interesting. So really, there's no process for me around it. Maybe there should be, but kind of just heads down building and touch base with folks kind of as it seems appropriate or as I need to. But
Mhm.
yeah, I would say like I've intentionally sought
Yeah,
it out, but then it does sort of have, as I maybe have said already, like it does definitely have sort of like then a compounding effect where it's like once you have a strong community, a strong support system, a strong network, then it definitely does start to, compound on its own.
yeah, yeah. And I mean, I understand that for most people, actually, the way they maintain or manage their personal connection, their support network is Twitter. A few thoughts on that. I think that's kind of what we're trying to do. I think now I know that's what we're trying to do at Down Protocol. So, kind of, how can you transform this all these connections that you have around you and people that you like and that you are interested in, and people that are interested in supporting you. But sometimes it's just kind of these loose connections, so people kind of miss the opportunities to help each other out when it would be easy. And I think it's related to this fact because the most builders and kind of high potential people are not actually on LinkedIn. So LinkedIn is a lot of salespeople and recruiters. So the builders are actually on Twitter or on Dribble. But these platforms, both Twitter and GitHub and Dribble, are not built or designed to be a place for you to maintain or kind of engage with your engage, yes, but don't maintain kind of your professional support network. They're focused on other goals, so it kind of gets lost. So the way you kind of you see or you remember people or you find that they can help you or you can help them is when you look at your feed, and if by any chance they speak about something that might be useful. And like we were talking in the beginning, if you by using a token, a social token or NFT, you can start creating much better and public data about your relationship with your support network, your career community, and over time, of course, tools on top that help you uh, kind of find those opportunities and then the meaningful engagement opportunities between those more easily, I think. So kind of final question and trying to wrap up this last part is, would you consider kind of launching your own social token or anything to help you take and give more value to this support network, or
Well,
how do you see this being valuable kind of in this particular scenario? So kind of for builders and founders and kind of knowledge workers instead of the creative musician target you're focusing on?
Well, so I have multiple tokens in my name, and just as a
Yeah.
builder in the space for testing purposes. But I don't actively use them at the moment. They're more just like for testing. But I mean, yeah, the spirit of your question, I think. So question, I think that in the case of somebody like me, where I'm definitely not a content creator, and like don't really want or feel like I have the bandwidth to like actively be building like a community around me that's like separate from or independent of like my work. So like the company that I'm building is the overwhelming majority of my time and mind share and whatnot. And so I wouldn't want to necessarily like take on also building up like an independent like community around that in the same way that I think creators have the opportunity to do with Web3. Um, but I do think that there's like this whole other dimension of like when I was getting started, like would I have issued a token and sort of let people participate in my potential future upside for in exchange for some capital upfront that maybe I needed to get started. I think that could have been definitely an interesting thing to consider. But I think then it would look kind of explicitly a little more like an ISA or more like equity or less like a rewards point. Like I think that, Matt Alston, me as an individual, I don't necessarily need a rewards point because what I'm is very much about like building this company. And so if I was going to do something like that, I'd probably like just build a social token for Bonfire and like launch it as part of Bonfire, because that's ultimately is the community that I care about building right now. But yeah, I think that really it needs to be like any successful social token has to be very much designed around like the mission of like the entity that's trying to create it. And so I think for me, like it's very, very hard to disentangle my own community from the community of Bonfire. So I would like just invest in issuing a token through Bonfire and building that community. But I think if I was like getting started and it was like me as an individual, that would have definitely been, a lot more compelling, I think, when I was just getting started, right? Because I like hadn't had the connections or network. And so I think that's something I would have definitely considered maybe at that time.
Yeah, I think your argument makes sense because I mean, Matt today and Bonfire
they're inextricably linked.
Yeah. My counter argument would be that more and more, and this might not apply in your case, of course, but more and more people are not defined by just one job. And this means, of course, in previous generations, kind of the goal was to have almost like a job for life. And the longer you can stay in the same job or company, it means the more successful you were. Kind of, this is kind of a mindset from previous generations. Also, seeing it as kind of a linear thing, your career, so one job at a time, so one full-time job at a time. And I think more and more nowadays, people are much more, they have kind of multiple threads at once. So they might have multiple projects they contribute to at the same time. Or even if they are kind of founders like that, completely focus on just one thing, the probability that there's not good, that thing is not their kind of life work is also big. So they might kind of start a company now, even if it is successful, they might kind of exit or take kind of a soul in the future and then start another project. So I think the idea here of a social token is kind of people being connected to this professional journey that you will have throughout kind of your career, and not necessarily just with one company. So for example, I might want to support Bonfire, but I might want to support Matt and the projects that you'll do in the future. They could be kind of side projects you do or future projects you do after Bonfire. Again, I don't know if this applies in your case, of course, because when we're focused on one thing, we just focus on that thing. But I think for more and more people, it's interesting to have this separation. So the people that are actually supporting you as well in the multi-threaded journey that your career will be, with side projects, with multiple things going on, and separating that with the actual project that you're working on. But I mean, it's not, I don't, it's not probably for everyone, but I think more and more there are people for whom this makes sense, this separation.
100%. And I think just having like the option, having the additional like means of building a network, I think, that's going to be a really powerful path for a lot of people. And of course, there's a lot of kind of the legal regulatory sorts of stuff that I think need to get worked out for it to like really erupt on like a mainstream level. But I do think that, especially for folks who don't have that network getting started or whatnot, like this is a really, really powerful, like, evening the playing field kind of opportunity. And it could just make a lot of sense for all parties involved. So yeah, I think that like it's very case by case, but I think that the opportunity potential for it to exist is extremely, well, I think it will have a profound impact on, a lot of people's lives. It's just like figuring out the exact mechanics, the exact use cases, the exact like kind of, details. And I think that's really that's really like the stage of maturity that we're at right now. Is like the concepts are extremely powerful, but we're still the details and we're still really building the details. And I think ultimately, like for a lot of these things, including like everything Bonfire is doing, like the devil is going to be in the details. It's going to be like, what are the exact use cases? What are the interactions that make sense to reward? And, what does this look like in year 5 or year 10, which is a completely open question that, nobody can answer yet.
Yeah.
We haven't gotten there. So yeah, there's all sorts of, I think really interesting questions and like challenges that we as builders in the space will certainly encounter, but I think the potential is immense, and that's why it's worth the journey.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, we'll do this journey together in different perspectives, tackling different niches and different problems. But I mean, we started at the same time. Hopefully, we'll last long together as well.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I mean, it's I didn't even notice that we went past the hour. But yeah, thank you so much, Matt, for this amazing chat and for taking an hour of your incredibly busy agenda to speak with us today. And yeah, hope to do another one of these in next year with a lot of new perspectives and new news about the space. It's how social tokens are being used. So yeah,
yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on. It was a blast.
Yeah, thank you for everyone that listened, and see you next week. Bye-bye.
So yeah.
If today's episode inspired you, don't forget to follow us on your podcast app to never miss upcoming interviews. Also, if you would like to share your journey with us, you know any hidden talent, or you just want to keep in touch with us, you can find our email in the description.